those of you who don't know, which is probably all of you. I'm an abnormality to creation, a child of the night, or in common terms, a monster. Now every monster has their own thingy, like hiding under a kid's bed or something. Mine is film. That is why they call me feature creature. My boss wants me to do something productive for once, whatever that means. I think he just wants to keep me busy, so I don't have another incident like I did with the last virgin sacrifice. Anyway, so here I am, and... What is it? I'm busy. What? Why are you even getting involved? You told me this was my thing. What? Those assholes always get the spotlight. What do you mean, what do I mean? Well, can I at least... Fine, I'll do it. I swear I could pound a railroad spike through his eye socket sometimes. Anyway, it looks like we have to do something vampire-related. Why? I don't know. No one tells me, Jack. Well, if we have to do a vampire thingy, it might as well be our movie to feature one. Nosferatu. I suppose it's only fair to go over a brief history of vampires for the sake of this particular movie, given it is the first major vampire work outside of a novel, and people's view of vampires differs from their perception of them about 100 years ago. So, vampires, what can I say? They're self-righteous, stuck-up sophisticates that have all the powers of the night and lure mortals to be their liquid dinners. They weren't always like that, though, no matter what they tell you. It all started in medieval Europe. The Catholics were scared of anything and everything slightly satanic, in their quest to find and destroy evil, some methods being unconventional, to say the least. They discovered many creatures, one of these being a corpse that rises from the dead every night to feast on blood to sustain its unnatural life. Feral and weak, they are more of a nuisance than anything. Basically what most people consider to be our modern zombie of today, just not able to be in sunlight. They went unnoticed for centuries until this one mofo came along and wrote a book about the most powerful vampire in history, Vlad the Impaler, or known by his more popular name, Dracula. The book was a hit and is now considered a literary classic. It put vampires in the public mind, and for whatever reason, as the popularity of vampires grew, so did their powers and egos. Eventually, the novel of Dracula became adapted to the newer medium of film by a German film company, and thus Nosferatu was born. Why is it called Nosferatu and not Dracula, you ask? That's because this movie was made without buying the copyright of a novel. I mean, how could that bite them in the ass? Anywho, as for the film itself, Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror, is a 1922 silent German expressionist film directed by F.W. Maurer. Under film studio Parna Film, Nosferatu was the studio's first and only production. They then filed for bankruptcy. The film's screenplay was written by Henrik Galen, who previously worked on another silent film, The Golem. Believe it or not, the whole movie was only filmed on one camera. What many don't know is that Universal's 31 Dracula is not the first film adaptation of the novel. This is. Although 31 adaptation became what most think of when they think of the character Dracula, such as the cape, the refinement of the Count, the iconic pendant, and the accent everyone does an impression of from time to time. While that Dracula conveys on fears of what some people might be behind a veil of deception and manners, this Dracula is much different. He is openly awkward and unnerving. He moves stiffly and corpse-like. If that even makes sense, given that corpses don't move no matter how hard you poke them. Trust me on that one. As I was saying, the 22 variant is much more animalistic. You can see a cold, dead look in his eyes. Accompanied by the haunting cinematography, he appears truly otherworldly. Any humanity in this version is extremely vague. The atmosphere this film portrays has created some of the most iconic shots and scenes in movie history, some looking like an image ripped right out of a nightmare. The dramatic angles accentuate the suspense of the horrors that are about to unfold upon the characters. Speaking of such, the characters in this film are what in the novel, give or take. Oddly enough, the vampire hunter Van Helsing is completely absent from this take, although one professor character seems to be at least inspired by Helsing. The character of Mina has a much larger role in the Count's defeat. In this incarnation, a vampire can only be killed by a woman giving up her own blood to the creature until dawn, so the vampire burns in the sun. Nosferatu was a financial and critical success. Unfortunately, Bram Stoker's widow got pissed due to the book's copyright being trampled on. Most copies of the film were destroyed by court order, and the few remaining prints changed the names of all the characters to try to differ from the novel. Because of this, the film lay dormant for years before it was finally restored and started to receive the recognition it deserves as the first Dracula movie and is one of the most important horror films ever made. As for my own 2 cents, I actually do enjoy this film. The acting for a silent film holds up decently well given everything. I find what they did with the character of Mina particularly interesting, with her sharing this kind of psychic link to Dracula. The way the film shows it, I like to think in this story, the loved ones of the vampire's victims feel their pain, adding another layer of eeriness. The best way I can describe this movie is eerie. Unlike other earlier Dracula films, this one I find has some truly skin-crawling moments, has a knack for putting you at unease. I kinda wish more Dracula performances took inspiration from Max Schreck, in his movements and appearance at least. That combined with Bella's charisma would truly be a horrifying Dracula. The sets and cinematography are incredibly gothic and give you a sense of the supernatural. My biggest complaint with the whole movie is that the second act has more action than the last act, and it can make the final act feel kinda long, and the defeat of Dracula comes off as slightly anticlimactic because of it. It's very fascinating to see a film that helps invent, but also deviates from modern vampire story tropes. Overall, I'd recommend this movie to anyone with the patience to see it. The film is public domain, so you can see it on pretty much anywhere on the internet. Even those sites. Wink, wink. Ah, shit. What? How's the Phantom of the Opera thing going? You told me vampire. You said tall, dark figure in a silent movie. What was I supposed to think? Motherfucker. I'll be back.